All right. My apologies to the Instagram and to the YouTube crowd. My audio was off. My audio should be on now. Are you all hearing me clearly? Are you all hearing me? Are you hearing me? Can you hear me now over on Instagram? Resolution is to make some cement money. I have no idea where this man get his idea that I'm making a set of cement money. This guy over on TikTok is convinced my money is nice because of cement. I have no idea where the cement is coming from. I have no investment in TCL whatsoever. So that is a lie. Don't look at me for that kind of money. Yeah. I heard that you couldn't hear over on YouTube. You're hearing now? You should be hearing now over on YouTube. Are you hearing now? The YouTube and the Instagram, if you're listening on YouTube or Instagram, very likely it would be slightly delayed as at least compared to the TikTok lives. Don't worry, as the technology improves, as more jerseys are bought, as you buy more jerseys, as I'm willing to take donations also. And as I expand, it would all get better soon. So I believe they're hearing me now over on Instagram and they're hearing me now over on YouTube also. All right. So you really got another device? Well, I have two cameras. J. Chris, let's not get into the too specific here. I have two cameras and that's what we're working on. Great. Over on YouTube, they're hearing me now. So let's get into the actual stories we're going to be talking about today. All right. More nurses, not less. And Cuban nurses have been hired. That's the tone coming from the Minister of Health. Mr. Minister of Health says that they've now, I don't know how many of you were in the live or looked at the contemplation where I spoke about the article that said there are multiple nurses now that are now resigning. Sorry, they aren't being fired, they are resigning. And those nurses that are resigning, the minister has come out against that article, saying that the article actually had it incorrect. These nurses aren't resigning. They are not resigning as the minister says. It's just they're moving from one RHA to the next. It's not a matter of resignation. But let's read this article and get into some of the specifics and see. Some of it doesn't quite add up to what the minister is saying. If you're being honest, it doesn't quite add up to what the minister is saying to some extent. All right. More nurses, not less, and Cuban nurses have been hired, according to the minister. Health Minister Terence Dialsing said that contrary to the Newsday article on December 26, which stated that 100 nurses resigned over the past year in search of overseas employment, the national healthcare system has experienced an increase in nursing staff. Speaking during Wednesday's virtual COVID-19 press conference, Dialsing stated that the newspaper's headline was misleading, that he continues to be taken aback by how health matters are discussed, stating that people will leave places of employment for a variety of reasons. The health minister noted that in the case of nurses, it's because they moved from one RHA regional health authority to another. Some migrate, some are on maternity leave, while others retire. So all those reasons will contribute to the numbers I'm going to give you now. All right. So he went on now to give some numbers. Good night all over in the TikTok live. I see we nice and we over 2,000, way over 3,000 likes already on the TikTok live. Nice. We're moving good on the TikTok. And we have 3 people over there on YouTube. Nice. And 6 over on Instagram. Welcome to all of you. The minister now went through some of the numbers to explain where the misleading is happening. And now I would like all of us to go through some of these numbers together and see if we see some of the questions that arise pretty quickly. He noted that the number that came in, all right, so all those reasons will contribute to the numbers, right? From the Eastern Regional Health Authority, the numbers of persons who have left is 12. But what has never been, what was never discussed is how many came into the system. He noted that the number that came in at the ERHE was 94. So there was a net gain of 84. And that side of the story was never told. Now, from the moment I read this bit of the article, the question that arose to me, the first question that popped up to me was, what stage of nurses are we talking about here? When you're saying that the ones that left were 12 and the ones that came in were 94, what stage of nurses we're talking about here? How much experience? How much training? You know, all nurses aren't equal. If we have 12 senior nurses leaving and we're bringing in 12 trainees and we're bringing in 94 trainees, those don't exactly swap equally with each other. All right, so we go through some more. The minister went on and quoted several numbers for each RHA. He went through the specifics for them. The Elsing stated that the total number of persons coming into the system has far exceeded the total number of persons leaving the system for various reasons. In addition to that, just today, I would have signed on to the recruitment of 40 extra Cuban nurses. Now, if we are having so many nurses coming in, then it's interesting that we still need the Cuban nurses. He stated that for the period 2019 to 2021, there was an intake of 7,227 nursing students, with 410 having graduated thus far. And I'm told, this is what the minister says, and I'm told that almost each of those 410 have been incorporated into the public system. Now, is somebody else seeing something weird here? We have 410 nursing students being incorporated into the public system. And if we add that 410 into the number he gave us, aren't those numbers corresponding a strange thing now? If we add he was saying that the net gain for nurses, the total, a net increase, he said the net increase for nurses across the board, the net increase for nurses was 225. We had 225 new nurses coming in. But if in that 225 net, remember net means after you take away how much was lost. So net we had 225 gain. Now, if we add 410 there, meaning that we had 410 nursing students joining the system during that time. 410 switches back that 225. Listen, I'm not the math springer. I'm just letting you all know this from the jump. I'm not the math springer. So we go slowly with this. We have 410 nursing students. It was a net gain of 225. What's the difference between 410 and 225? That's what? 185. So, in fact, according to the minister's own numbers, if we were to exclude the nursing students out of this system, if we were to take out the nursing students from here, we would actually have a net loss of 185 nurses for the year. Without the nursing students added to the system, from the minister's own numbers. Now, I could be misunderstanding something. You're free to go read the article yourself. It's in the Daily Express. But according to the minister's own numbers, that's supposed to mean that we actually had a net loss of 185. And that would mean the majority of the nurses that have left would have been senior staff, and they would have been replaced by junior staff. And if I'm to understand the healthcare system even a little, I think that's not exactly a desirable thing. That's not something that you would be wanting in your healthcare system. You would prefer having some senior members and staff, not just all the junior members there keeping everyone company. That isn't really most people's idea of a well-functioning healthcare system. Is it? You love my tree, by the way, and I saw many nurses looking to go US and Canada because they want them. That's why they get the cheap labor from Cuba. And I understand what the minister is trying to do here. He's the Minister of Health. He is seeking to make sure that people have confidence in the healthcare system. as the Minister of Health, you don't want it to seem like you are losing control of this healthcare system, and you don't want it to seem like we're losing nurses. And in truth and in fact, if you're talking just about quantity here and getting enough people to man all these stations, maybe it's a beneficial thing that we have this added 225 nurses. But if the case is now that we have junior nurses in places where maybe senior nurses were supposed to be, then that's not exactly a favorable look for the ministry, and it's not exactly a favorable look for the country. And he went on to say that he hopes that this gives a more holistic look of the healthcare system. And to me, it does give a more holistic look. And unless there's some other number there, and when he was giving the full number of the net gain, he didn't include the nursing students. Unless that's the case, it seems to me like we have had a net loss of senior nurses, and the real balloon in nursing staff we have gained were junior. There's been a gain, yet still one registered nurse on the night shift over the holidays. And I've heard some horror stories about the hospital system. So many people you hear talk about the hospital system in Trinidad, and their main advice is to stay out of it. He also sought to clarify some of the controversy surrounding an incident on Sunday where over 100 persons were discovered aboard a pleasure craft. So he sought to clear his name in the incident with the Boxing Day cruise. That's what he sought to do also in that same bit of speaking. And what he pointed out, to be fair to him, he pointed out the fact that the letter wasn't written to him asking permission, and he didn't grant any permission for anyone to have any party or any cruise. Yes, G. Chris, YouTube has a bit of a nicer layout if you're looking to read the article also. But the YouTube is a bit delayed and the camera quality for now is a bit lower. To be fair to the minister, the letter that was written to him was written on the morning of the incident. It was written on the morning of Boxing Day. And it really wasn't written in a manner asking for permission. The letter was just stating their intentions. He spoke on this saying, so the letter did not seek permission. The letter informed me that we were doing this. So let me clearly state under Section 8 of the Public Health Rule, and we said this when we launched the Safe Zone initiative, that once you download the poster that you put up, that is all you need to do, and you have agreed to operate as a safe zone. The minister nor the ministry does not give permission or authorization to operate as a safe zone. So, if I am to understand what he is saying there clearly, once you could print safe zone, stick and post it on the location you're a safe zone. That is what he is saying there, Mr. Positive Radiation. That is literally what he is saying. That there's no stipulation about exactly who is a safe zone. There's no ministry overseeing permission of granting safe zones. And I made sure, just to make sure, because to me, I like to go down sometimes to the source of something to make sure you're really understanding what is going on there, and it's kind of clear. So I went to the actual public health ordinance that they released, the legal notice, and to the Section 8 that he mentioned. And there's a list of who can qualify to be a safe zone. So it's not as simple as downloading the sticker or the poster. There are some qualifications. You have to be either a restaurant, a bar, a common gaming house, betting pool, or office licensed under the Gambling and Betting Act, a cinema or a theater, a private members club, a theater under the Theatres and Dance Halls Act, a gym and fitness center, water parks, and public swimming pools. So that's the limitations there. And knowing those limitations, did they see a boat or a pleasure craft or a pleasure vessel? So there's one problem there for them. But maybe, as we spoke before, they could twist it in some way to be considered a restaurant. And the stipulations are just that you follow the rules of a safe zone and you download the sticker and put it up. So I wonder if then I could change my home to a safe zone in some sense. How to get a safe zone? Like where on the internet? The ministry website? Correct. That is where you get the safe zone. The bazinga, I have answered that question so many times. And good night, sir. Blessings to you also, unknown boy. Now, getting even further into today's news. Beside the fact that our nursing staff may well be being replaced by junior students. Also, in somewhat bleak seeming news, flour prices are set to increase from Monday. Yes, yes. That's some bad news right there. And especially for those of us who are the doubles lovers and love the aloo pies and mornings and etc, etc, etc. I understand the bazinga. I know you're probably first viewing this, so you wouldn't have seen the answer to that question before, but I did answer it. The answer is yes. Doubles about to turn into gold. Yes, pretty much. And pies and nearly everything else that uses flour. In fact, the most of Trinidad uses flour. If you're on the Indo side of Trinidad, that's your roti price. If you're on the Afro side of Trinidad, well, that's your bake price. It goes all directions. And I wonder if, seeing as Kiss already raised their price before, I hope that they don't have much more prices to raise, because they rose their price. They raised, I was wondering which exactly is the word there. They raised their prices since, earlier this month or last month. So possibly that shouldn't have an increase in price from them. But going on into exactly what happened. The price of flour is expected to rise from Monday, January 3rd, 2022. The National Flour Mills has announced. With the increased cost of wheat and freight globally, National Flour Mills today announced its decision to increase the wholesale price of flour by between 15% and 22%, with a suggested increase averaging around 19% on the retail price of flour to the consumer. 19% is quite a bit. Now, to be very honest, I buy some flour and I don't even really know the price of the flour. I am not the one who checks the price of the flour, to be very frank with you. That may be not a good thing on my part, but I'm just not the serious flour buyer. To those who buy flour, what is the price of flour right now? Listen, there's no cement money here. Forget that talk. To those who buy flour, what's the price of flour right now? What's the price of a bag of flour right now? Yes, consuming too much flour can lead to comorbidities. 56, that's the price of a bag of flour, $56. And somewhere around there, so somewhere around $60, we'd say. 65, wow. If it's $65 and they're talking about raising it around 19%, that's 20%. So 65 divided by what? 5. Again, as I keep saying, I am not the math springer. So someone in the chat there, 65 divided by 5. Where are the mathematicians in the chat? Someone says they have to stretch their flour with water now. It's only so far the flour could stretch to. It's just only so far. So 65 divided by 5 is going to give you 13. And now if you're adding that $13 for that $65 bag of flour plus 13, you're going to now end up with what? $78? $78 from 65 is quite an increase. That's an increase that you would feel. That's not some cents being increased there. That's an increase that could really hit your pockets and you could start to notice that. Commenting on the decision, NFM CEO Ian Mitchell said, "This was by no means an easy decision, as we did everything within our control to try to hold our prices. But with the staggering increases in raw materials and shipping costs, we were left with no choice but to make the adjustment. We are acutely aware of the knock-on effect that an increase in price of flour could have in the market, but we cannot sell a product for less than it costs to produce." And I understand that point. I really do understand that point. And to be fair to NFM, for quite some time now, the raw materials and the shipping costs, etc., have been increasing, and they weren't having a corresponding increase in their prices. To be fair to them, there's an article here from since August. Thursday, the 12th of August, National Flour Mills holds flour prices stable despite higher wheat prices. National Flour Mills unaudited financial statements for the quarter ending June 30th, 2021, released earlier this week, was a statement to what businesses are experiencing all over the world as a result of shocks along its value chain. From the acquisitions of raw materials to getting packaging to the costs associated with selling and distributing the end product, NFM, the state supplier of flour, realized $2 million in profit. So what NFM was saying from since way back then is that they were struggling to make a profit. NFM has been struggling to make a profit for quite some time now. And if they were struggling to make a profit, you could understand why in the long run they would have to raise that price. Can we produce our wheat? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt that we could produce our wheat. Even if we get a strain that grows relatively well in Trinidad and Tobago, very likely we wouldn't have enough land space to produce that much wheat. Most of the wheat that is produced would be produced in places with massive flat land area where they could really do some extensive agriculture. So in Canada, they do wheat production. And if you look at Canadian news, I did do some search when I was looking into this article. And if you look at Canadian news, their harvest for wheat has been down this year. Their harvest for wheat has been down this year, and that has caused the prices for wheat even in Canada to rise. If you look at the United States, I believe they were saying they have had their lowest wheat yield for quite some years too. If you look at Russia, they're having low wheat yields also. So many of the producers of wheat were having some trouble also. So it's not just a matter of whether they wanted to raise prices, it's kind of a perfect storm. And the chairman of NFM went on to say that also. NFM chairman Nigel Romano said, "It's an unfortunate analogy, especially given the realities of climate change, but we have been confronted by the perfect storm. 2020 witnessed the lowest wheat yields since 2007. And the supply chain disruptions caused by the pandemic have increased the freight costs significantly, further impacting the landed cost of all grain and other material inputs. NFM is a price taker. We have no control over the landed costs of our raw materials, which now account for 64% of our production costs." So what he's saying is NFM doesn't really have much choice in this. NFM doesn't go out there and make the wheat. They don't plant the wheat. They have no wheat farms anywhere out there. What they do is they import it. And when they're importing it, they don't have a say on the price of the wheat itself. They don't have a say on that. They don't have a say on the price of the boat, the courier ships to bring the wheat over to Trinidad. They don't have a say in any of those things. They have no say in that matter. And that's what the chairman was saying there, that they're just a price taker. They just have to take the price that is presented to them. The price that you're going to have to pay is this. Good night, interesting. The price that you're going to have to pay is this, and you just have to take it. Take that and go on with it. There's nothing that can be done about it. There's nothing that they can do about that. So, from our side, how angry can you really be with NFM on NFM's side? They don't really have much choice in that matter. And then the problem with that now is going to be, as they already admitted, the trickle-down effect, the knock-on effect. How many different things in our society are going to see price rises because of that? Now, here's the thing. The price raise wouldn't just affect things that only use flour. For example, if I remember, we don't have framers in Trinidad, we can grow the raw material for flour. I remember, my mother always says, because my mother had 3 sons, she always said that some older lady gave her some advice a long time ago. When they saw that she had 3 sons, they told her, "You're going to need a lot of flour. Get a lot of flour." And if that's the case, for a family that has to feed someone for quite a few people, flour is usually one of the cheaper things that could spread a bit further. So many families that have many mouths to feed tend to use flour a lot. And if you're a family using flour a lot and now the price of flour increases, whatever the person who has to buy that flour in the household, let's say the parent in that household is a painter, they paint for a living. Let's say that. Now, what's going to happen there? That painter is going to have to increase his painting price because now the flour prices have increased and he has to pay more money to feed the same amount of mouths. So he's going to have to increase that painting price too. And can you really blame him? Can you really blame him? That's the reality of the situation he finds himself in also. That's the reality of the situation he finds himself in also. He doesn't have control over that, just as NFM wouldn't have control over the prices of their raw materials. Similarly, someone who just has to buy the flour to feed their family, they don't have much control over the price of their services that they would now have to offer everyone else. They would have to offer someone their service at a price that they can now take and buy groceries with. That's just the reality of it. Now, in the chat, I saw some people raise some very good points. I saw someone was saying something about the need for cassava flour. I thought we were seriously looking into cassava flour. Now, you see me, that's a good idea to me. I like that kind of idea. That's something I am always interested in because my little farm happens to have some cassava growing in it. So let's see, if the case is that someone could fine-tune the art of producing cassava flour and you open up your mill, your cassava mill, to all cassava farmers in Trinidad and Tobago, I am sure that there would be an industry that could be created from this. But it's who would be willing to take that risk. You see, in Trinidad and Tobago, what we have become generally accustomed to in Trinidad and Tobago is that kind of risk, that size of a risk, is generally taken in this country by our government. Our government owns NFM, and they were the primary people in charge of bringing in flour and making flour for a very long time, and that has been with a purpose. Very few people go into that kind of market, and I think as Trinidadians, as if you're interested in the business market in Trinidad, I think something like that is where we should be getting into more. Ideas like that should be where we should be looking in, and possibly not only looking for government help. Even we have young people that went through university and did agribusiness, did all manner of agricultural sciences in the university, and they studied it and they spent so much time doing it. So maybe a good idea would be that one of them could look into the research of how to create that cassava flour in Trinidad and Tobago, and if such a thing would be sustainable in our environment, in our climate, in our economy. When I say climate, I mean our economical climate. Our present method of farming cassava is limited. It was formerly Tobago cassava products. Wait, let me read that chain of events that you're talking about there. What was formerly Tobago cassava products? Tadco THA company produces good cassava flour. I don't know if it's available in Trinidad. It was formerly Tobago cassava products. It is not well advertised. And there we have the problem. If it is not well advertised, how are you going to get more people to do it? And the thing is, to me, when I look at our present, the present atmosphere we live in, when we're talking about who is in our country, the age group that is most present in purchasing things, I think we have a market for something as unique and niche as cassava flour. And I am sure you could find some very good health benefits that would very likely put cassava flour over wheat flour. And if that is the case, you could advertise it like that, and I'm sure you're going to get buyers. The issue is getting enough cassava locally. Is that really an issue? Well, then I think in that case, more partnership needs to happen with more farmers, because I live in Central. I am very much aware that our government, Trinidad and Tobago's government, gave away 2-acre parcels of land to many different farmers in Central, and they're still sitting there covered by bush doing nothing. So maybe some kind of deal needs to be done. Listen, I am quite sure if there's a mill somewhere that advertises they want cassava and the prices they're willing to pay for it, and they want it year round, I am pretty sure that many more farmers would increase their production and do that. I honestly do think so, because I know some people who have land, and cassava is not a very difficult thing to plant. Cassava is pretty low maintenance, so I'm not sure about that. I think there's some lack in communication going on there, because surely to me, there must be something that could be done to increase the communication there. All right. Some of my chats getting a little tied up there. Let me see if I could sort them out. make sure I'm seeing each one of these chats properly. Cassava and sweet potato flour, real expensive, locally produced. They already have cassava and sweet potato flour products, but it's expensive, produced in Trinidad. When you're saying expensive, this is from the Instagram chat. When you're saying expensive, how expensive is expensive? How expensive is it locally? I know about the cassava and dasheen cereal. You see, that's part of the problem also. To me, this is part of the problem to me. When I'm looking and seeing some of these things, and they seem like they're more of a novelty item. Some people don't seem like they're very serious about creating it. That would create some problems. But if you have this and it's very serious on the market, I'm sure that more people would get into it. Because we all know flour does have some negative effects. Perhaps a good of this price increase would lead to people finding healthier alternatives to flour. Who knows? Someone is saying perhaps the price increase in flour may lead to people making healthier choices and actually getting some better alternatives to the wheat flour that we are accustomed to, because we do know that is unhealthy. Now, here's the problem though with that. The thing I lament about with many of the great ideas about progress in modern civilization is sometimes who is left behind. Sometimes who is left behind when we see the advancement happening. So, for example, a lot of people, I hear so many people constantly talk about things like, we should be moving away from the natural gas and the oil sectors and these non-renewable resources. And we need to go into the renewable resources. But factually speaking, if today for tomorrow, and people like, if you know the name Greta Thunberg, etc., they talk about we need to do it now. If that realistically happens now, millions, even billions of people, and it would almost surely be the poorer people in our societies, are going to die nearly immediately. So, wow, $45 for the cassava flour, the size of a small ibis flour. Yeah, that's a bit expensive. So, the reality is, yes, it may be a healthier alternative if we could find something else other than the wheat flour, but who can afford that? As someone says here, $45 for a pack as small as the small pack of the wheat flour. That may not be sustainable for many of the people on the poorer ends of our society. It just might not work. Culture would trump... What was that? Culture would trump it. Alright. Culture would trump health in Trinidad. Example doubles root. Yeah, I believe that also. The thing is, Trinidadians generally seem to me to... Many Trinidadians, let me not say all, but many Trinidadians seem to me like when prices increase, they like to show that they would buy it for spite. Because it increased, now we go in and buy it. So, honestly, I'm sure if Doubles price increases, people are still going to buy it. And to be fair to Doubles people, $5 compared to the usual price of fast food actually isn't a ridiculous price. To be fair to the Doubles people out there. Now, my final story actually it isn't my final story, but an interesting story that I've seen several small snippets of stories like this that have popped up on my radar over the past month or so. It seems like finally the Prisons Association is clamping down more strictly on errant prison officers who are bringing in the contraband stuff and helping the prisoners do their mischief. It seems to me like the prison officers, the prison association, not the prison association. It would be the full, what you would call that? What's the entirety of the prisons association called? The prison service. The entirety of the prison service seem like they would be clamping down more on prison officers. Another prison officer found with contraband. And this other prison officer was found now on Carrera with contraband. And that's following two more prison officers found, 2 or 3 days ago, with contraband entering the maximum security prison. And this was a point I made when I was speaking about the unfortunate killing of so many of our prisons officers. The reality is with the prisons officers, a lot of them their fellow officers are their own worst enemies. You see, when an entire institution is corrupt, it's very difficult then for some small pockets of that institution to then try to be honest. If you're trying to be honest amidst an overall corrupt system, you're putting yourself at grave danger. However, if the entirety of the system is more or less honest, is more or less upright, has a fair deal of integrity, then the idea, the very point of killing them wouldn't actually stand up, because there's no need to wipe one out when all of them are honest. It kind of defeats the purpose of trying to harm them in that way. I think the prisons authority is the reason that they are so easy of a target is because of the rampant corruption in their ranks. Someone says they think the prisons officers trumps the police in terms of corruption. I am leaning towards believing that too. Now, the prisons authority, the prison officers, are in a unique position, I think. They're in a very unique position. Because of the nature of their job, they're exposed nearly constantly to pretty dangerous individuals. So the likelihood of them being in danger increases. And I think that weird positioning that weird positioning that the prisons officers are in puts them at even a higher risk of becoming corrupt. The ever famous risk now, where you are not only at danger if you don't obey, but you would get rewarded if you do obey. The Pablo Escobar statement: plata or plomo. You get the silver or you get the lead. That's a pretty hard thing to turn up. It's a pretty hard thing to turn up, and especially if you see that they do seem like they can reach you. That's scary. Shouldn't the prison service have an external audit unit to keep them in check? Here's the thing. Who is going to be in that external audit unit? We were speaking about this last night in the live. Part of the problem with a lot of these things is the bureaucracy that it creates. Okay, we're going to create an external unit. So we're going to create an external unit, and they're going to look over the guards. But then, who is going to look over the external unit to make sure that the external unit itself doesn't become corrupt? Who is going to do that? And what is there now to say that this external unit wouldn't now be at risk of the very same thing? In all services, the corruption is in the minority. I actually agree with that, Mr. Richard Globerman. I actually think that is true. The corruption is very likely in the minority. But how big a minority is it is actually very important. How big a minority is it? And the effect of that minority. You see, in a prison, if you have someone who is well known in the underworld, and you have a minority of guards who get through there and give them phones, that one act could be possibly 500 times worse than a corrupt police who turns a blind eye to someone selling weed on a drug block. A few bad ones ruins it for the entire thing. You don't need that many to ruin it. You do not need that many to ruin it. Alright, and now to possibly my most interesting article for the night. I had to make sure to pull up this one. I don't know how many of you remember the NATOC General Secretary. The NATOC General Secretary made a request. When he said that they weren't accepting the mandatory vaccines, he made a request for something very specific. I don't know how many of you were in the chat and can remember that. What was he asking for? The NATOC General Secretary, that union, they didn't go to the meeting with the Attorney General. They took some time and they released a statement a little later than the other unions. And they asked for a specific bit of information. Now, no, it was Mr. Roger that asked to prove the long-term effects. What NATOC asked for was the breakdown of COVID deaths. They wanted to know how are we checking COVID deaths in Trinidad and Tobago? Now, here's the thing. I've seen some people already lambast him because of this. Who does he think he is? He thinks he's a virologist? What he need to know this for? Why? No, I think that is idiotic. To think that we'd have people running a system that is in charge of measures taking over the entire country and no one is supposed to question them. They are above question. So today when I spoke about the masks, so many people are so bought into this. They would say they believe in the masks, but it has nothing to do with the data. All the time it was believe in the science, but now it's believe in the masks, believe in the policies, because they have been convinced over time. The policy has been here for so long. They've heard it preached in their ears for so many times that if you do this, you'll be safe. If you do this, you'll be safe. And they'll be wearing a mask, get COVID, get it 2 times, and still be there thinking, yes, this mask is what we need to really be safe. That does not make sense. Question these things. Go look and see if what is being said actually lines up with factual data. And the thing is, there have been so many studies done already on these masks, for example, to show that they aren't effective at what you're saying they're effective at. And I feel so saddened when I look around and I see some people with a black mask walking around, pulling it over their nose because they know a police officer will see them with a black mask walking down the road and say, he's a smarter man than the man without a mask. That is ridiculous to me. Question, if you're wearing a mask and have COVID and you keep reusing it without, oh my goodness, why would you do that? Would you have COVID for longer? You may get worse symptoms because part of what makes getting COVID and many viruses worse has to do with something called your viral load. The higher your viral load, oftentimes it could increase the symptoms in you, and what it can also do is increase your risk of spreading it to someone else. So that's just not a good idea. And really and truly, if you're watching, I'm just making a pause for the masks fabric. If you're watching these masks, and for someone like me, I sweat very easily. If you see me occasionally do the little dab, it's because I sweat extremely easily. And when I put on this mask, if I walk down, I don't travel a lot these days, but I'm thinking if I'm traveling and I have a distance to walk, then I jump into a hot maxi and then I jump out of this maxi and have another bit of a distance to walk. And I'm wearing a mask. I can't imagine how sweaty that would get by then. And I'm having this sweaty mask here. And this wet mask is going to be sticking up with all the dirt and there's no way you can convince me that is more healthy than if I just take off the mask and walk. In fact, there's proof that it isn't. But we may do that some other time. Natak might carry us down the conspiracy rabbit hole, find out what's really going on. They didn't carry us necessarily down the conspiracy rabbit hole because the CMO actually did answer and he did define how we check our COVID deaths. And this is very interesting. Let's get into it. CMO defines COVID-19 deaths. 2 categories of deceased patients are considered as being COVID-19 deaths. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Roshan Parasram said at Wednesday's virtual news briefing held by the Ministry of Health. Also present was the Health Minister. Parasram remarks came after what NATOC President said. Firstly, the CMO said anyone that has passed away and has a COVID positive test at the time of death will be classed as COVID positive, dying with COVID. Secondly, he considered people who had actually died from COVID-19. Anyone that would have had COVID, for example, and passed away, what happens is that the clinicians make a decision. They put on the death certificate that what they think is the cause of death, and that is what is generally utilized. Now, I am sure these clinicians they're experts in their fields. I am not questioning that. But can we really determine cause of death by just what a clinician thinks? So there isn't an autopsy here to really confirm what really caused the death, if it really is the COVID-19. It's just if the clinician thinks so. I am not coming here to question the clinicians and their expertise, but I mean, that is it just me? Is it just me, or does somebody else find that as someone is named in the TikTok in the TikTok chat here, someone is named interesting and I find that interesting also. All right, but that isn't where it ends. That isn't where it ends. Parasram said clinicians and details to the ministry's sends details, to the ministry's central repository of data. They actually say that the person has died of complications of COVID, so we use both categories, add them together, and that's how you get deaths. So do you understand what the both categories were? The CMO later elaborated. Let's get more specific. He later elaborated. Generally, there are two main categories: persons who would have died with COVID and those who died of COVID, meaning of complications of COVID. So we have two broad categories: persons who would have died at home, etc. And he went on to name that. And what he was saying there is that those two broad categories of persons who died of COVID and persons who died with COVID are both checked as COVID deaths in our country. Now, here's this other part. As it relates to the unknown deaths, for example, somebody collapses at your home. They would not have been swabbed before. They don't know their status. What happens is that when they come in and are brought into the institutions, at that point they are swabbed, and we count those as persons that would have died having a positive swab at the time of death. Through the system, we have the police service and DMOs. They are responsible for all the deaths outside of the hospital. So we think we have cast a very wide net and are able to capture all the deaths, inclusive of everything that happens outside of the hospital. Probably easy. Do they have the figures distinguishing the two? My question to CMO is how many people died from direct impact of COVID rather than the issues. And I think, this is my personal view, I find it's not very difficult to give people those two different numbers. Tell people who died with COVID as a separate number than who died of COVID. And according to the CMO, what the CMO is saying here is they actually have that data. The data comes into them separated into those two broad categories. So what's so difficult about giving those two broad categories? And listen, people have a right to be suspicious about this. The NATOC president was right when he spoke about this. If you are inflated, and I am not, hear me and don't hear what I'm not saying. I am not saying that the numbers are known to be inflated. I do not know that. But if the case is that the numbers are being inflated, if that is the case, you would be increasing panic in the country and you would be causing people to make decisions based on incorrect information. They wouldn't have had the accurate information in order to make the decisions that they are making. And that is not a good thing. You would have people being more alarmed for something that is dangerous, but they're not having an accurate representation of it. If someone tells you, if you're walking in the road and someone tells you a dangerous cat is on the loose, it might be a lion, run for your life. It might be 3 lions and a tiger, so 4 dangerous cats are on the loose. And then you say, that doesn't sound right, and you bend the corner and you take a peep and you see 4 tomcats, 4 home tomcats sitting in the road looking at you. It's a different thing. It is a different thing. Yes, there were 4 cats. Maybe the 4 cats are wild and maybe they're interested in harming people. Maybe, who knows? But there's a difference to it. And if you're being honest with people, if you're saying that we're trying to get people to make the correct decisions in this here, and you're trying to be honest with the people and what you want them to do, then you would want to give them honest information. Honest information. And for example, this is another problem that I had with some correlating of some information that I found did some bunching together of some information that I found didn't have to be bunched together. So many people who are extremely vaccine hesitant have a problem with what is being said when they see in the hospital, it's predominantly unvaccinated people, and they give a number. And the number includes people who are partially vaccinated. Now, here's what I'm saying. How difficult would it be for a country, for a health institution, for the health authorities to separate the numbers? Tell us how many people in the ICU and how many people died were fully vaccinated, how many were partially vaccinated, and how many were totally and fully unvaccinated. Now, that's not a very difficult thing, I think. What's going on there in the chat? K. Cooper, COVID got pretty scary to me today. My cousin passed and he was fully vaccinated. I am sincerely sorry for your loss. Condolences, Mr. Cooper. And that's also the truth. Some people do pass while fully vaccinated. Yes, as I was saying though, I think it wouldn't be very difficult to separate some of these things. And if you are able to give some people some more honest information, then the people are more likely to trust you. It disappoints me so much when it seems like people's idea of how to get things done is to trick and cajole and coerce people into doing it, instead of trying to convince people with the honest information and hoping that they could come to the logical conclusion also. It's kind of insulting that you think you need to hide some information and make it a little shadowy and obscure it a bit in order to make somebody believe something. I don't like that. I think I believe that the vaccines for many people would be helpful, and for many people they should take them. But I also believe that the information coming out, the data that is coming out on it, should be as honest as possible. Similarly, the data on deaths. Many people are scared in Trinidad and Tobago right now because of deaths. If the 37 record deaths that we experienced on Christmas Eve actually had 4 people that died from COVID, and all 33 others died with COVID, then the picture that we are getting would actually be dishonest. It wouldn't be an honest picture. The alarm that was raised wouldn't make sense. And then if you're doing that, it would be more difficult to estimate now how deadly a strain may actually be, how deadly this bit of a spike may be in our country, because we don't know how many people are dying because of the virus versus it may just be. So, for example, now look at this. This very scary reality that we would very likely face not too far from now. This very scary reality. Omicron is here. Omicron is coming. What is known about Omicron thus far seems to suggest that Omicron is a lot more infectious and it's going to spread faster and to more people. If now this milder virus that spreads much faster spreads to just about everyone in the country and people die either way every day, we are very likely going to see a ballooning in our COVID deaths, because everyone in the country has COVID, so everyone that dies is a COVID death. While it may very well be that less people are dying because of the virus. And if you are giving people the information in that format now, it's actually not going to work. It's going to give people a dishonest view. Omicron might come and we may actually be in a place where we should be breathing a sigh of relief. We should be like, we're seeing the end. The end is in sight. While information given like that, where you collate the numbers of die with and die from, would be having people worried, thinking that, oh no, we are now getting into the worst of it. And here's some curious things of that. In most places in the world, this year with the vaccine has seen a lot more deaths than last year without the vaccine. Now, there are many plausible reasons for that. One reason could be that the virus just reached a lot further this year, so it was able to reach to a lot more people. That's part of it. Also, I wouldn't doubt that part of it could be in how the numbers are checked. If the numbers are checked in a strange way, the number of deaths could change any day by just how it is being checked. Yes, I'm aware in South Africa, the hospitalization is down 91% from Omicron. And here's a country that even checks it stranger than Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad already has that weird checking there. But in the United Kingdom, I believe how they check their numbers is if you die within 28 days or something to that length of a positive test with COVID. How is that rational? And then if multiple things happen at the same time. So if we're using this kind of statistic to measure deaths, and then Omicron comes and balloons the amount of people that test positive. And now you're testing more people. So you're going to have a picture that looks like infections are skyrocketing because you're testing way more people, and deaths are skyrocketing because now everyone that dies with the virus is a death. And it gives the picture of a scary thing from Omicron, while it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Unfortunate. And in that sense, this is why I fully agreed. I fully agreed with the NATOC president on the question he asked. I fully agreed. Because I don't know how many of you also remembered that I pointed out in multiple earlier lives, I pointed this out. I've been repeating it. That I think a lot of the policies that are going on right now, how these policies are taken or refused, depends on how this Omicron strain pans out. The statement I've said numerous times, if mid-January comes and we're having one death every 2 weeks because of COVID, then telling people you're going to fire them and not pay them if they don't get vaccinated when only one person every 2 weeks is dying is going to seem rightly ridiculous, and people are going to disregard that entire thing. However, if the cases come mid-January, the deaths are reading as similarly 30 plus per day, 40 plus per day, or even 50s, then all policies relating to COVID would very likely be accepted. Anything could be done because everyone is going to be very scared. Everyone is going to be very scared because of that. And here's how that goes. If now we have a dishonest representation of the death rate, and the death rate is what allows people to believe or disregard policies, you understand fully well then why our Union General Secretary would be asking for confirmation on how we check deaths. Because I don't know if I'm ascribing to him further thought than he thought, but this is how I'm thinking about it. If I was a union president, I would want that established too, because they would be very, very well aware the stringency of measures that could be passed are determinant on the death rate. That's the main thing. That is the main thing. Above all else, the death rate. Everyone in Trinidad could get COVID every day, day in, day out. If no one dies, no one cares. If a lot of people die, then all measures fly. So, Mr. Union President actually had a very good point. And if I were a union president or I were in a union, I would be asking, my next request would be that they separate those numbers. Can you please give us those numbers separated? Respectfully, I'm not an expert, I'm not a virologist, I'm not a doctor. I'm asking that the experts out there, please give us these numbers separated so that we could have a more specific and accurate understanding of where we are in the pandemic now. And if we can get those numbers separate, then I think they could get a more honest picture of Omicron, and maybe coming January, they could see whether these mandatory measures would actually make more sense. What do you all say in the chat? Do you all agree? I'm reaching about the end of the live to YouTube and to Instagram, so I'm going to be clicking off those now. Any last comments from the YouTube or the Instagram live, folks? Thanks to all of you that tuned in. Much appreciated. I really do appreciate it, honestly. All how many? 4 and 6? I'm not sure quite yet, but I appreciate it anyway. Any last comments from any one of you all? before I stop here. What's going on with my mouse? My mouse decided that he wants to play. Alright. Nothing lasts from those two lives. So, good night to YouTube. Good night to Instagram. I may see you all again tomorrow, according to how the live goes. Laters.